Welcome to the session 2 of the Global Marathon. My name is Angela Linto. I'm the Albert Michelson Distinguished Service Professor of Astronomy and Astrophysics at the University of Chicago. And I would like to share with you some of what inspires me to do the research I do. So one of the things that inspires me is how we understand the universe. The universe is this incredibly large place, probably infinite place, and in it there are lots of galaxies, and in the top of a mountain you can see, for example, in such an image, the galaxy that we live in, the Milky Way. You can see a comet that is nearby the solar system visiting us, and you can see little galaxies which are nearby our galaxy, the Magellan Clouds. These you can see with your own eyes, and if you want to see further away you need powerful telescopes. The first female astronomer to be paid to do astronomy was also inspired by the universe, Caroline Herschel. She used telescopes to discover 8 comets, and she did catalog of all the different types of nebulae that she was observing, the early days of what we call today, astronomy as we know it. She would be pretty surprised by the amount of knowledge that we have gathered with the much bigger telescopes, much more powerful telescopes that can see the universe in many different wavelengths, in many different types of light, from radio light to all the way to gamma ray light. And this is one way to understand the universe, and it's very inspiring to many of us. Another type of inspiration comes from, for example, somebody like Marie Curie, who was trying to understand the fundamental nature of what composes matter. So we have the periodic table that we know from school, and we know that that can be explained with very simple 3 particles, protons, neutrons in the nucleus of the atom, and the electron going around. And we now know that the proton and the neutron are actually made of quarks, and here's the new table of elements that we have, right? So we have quarks, we have leptons, which the electron is the first example of such leptons, and we have the muon and the tau. We also have neutrinos, which are leptons, and I'll come back to neutrinos. These are very low mass particles, which are almost like light, but they actually have a little small mass, and they change flavors from one to another, from electron to muon and from tau neutrinos. So very interesting particles. And then we have the forces of nature, which are gravity, plus electromagnetism, and the strong and the weak interactions that are nuclear. On top of all these particles of matter and interactions, we have the Higgs boson, which was something that particle physicists spent 50 years trying to find, and finally at CERN, which is the largest accelerator that humans have made, with thousands of scientists, we have this CERN accelerator, the Large Hadron Collider, which was able to discover the Higgs recently. Now, this is an energy which is amazing. It's really, really high energy. That's why all this effort went into to be able to really understand particles of nature at these very high energy scales. Now, what we observe from the universe are particles which are much higher energies than the one that we can accelerate at CERN. They arrive on Earth, for example, neutrinos, photons, and protons of much higher energies. They arrive on Earth, and the way we can see them, they're very, very rare. They arrive a couple a year in the whole city of Chicago. When they arrive, they multiply because they have so much energy. There's one little subatomic particle becomes billions of particles on the atmosphere, making what's called an extensive air shower, atmospheric shower. And that's what we observe. We observe the shower of particles that rain on us very rarely, but all together, and they come and we detect them with particle detectors or with telescopes. So what I'm working on is trying to understand the origin of where these particles came from. A little bit about my background. I grew up in Brazil. I did my undergraduate in Brazil. I did my graduate studies at MIT, my PhD. Then I went to do a postdoctoral studies at Fermilab, and finally joined the University of Chicago, where I've been since. My goal, as I told you, is to understand the origin of the particles that arrive on Earth at these very high energies. Also, understand how they interact, both in the sources that we don't know exactly what they are. Theories involve supermassive black holes in centers of galaxies, or some very fast spinning stars, for example. So, we don't really know what the object of these accelerators are, but we know one thing, that they're not in our galaxy, that they're coming from outside the galaxy. And this is a result from one of the efforts that I've been involved in. So I'm a part of a very large team with 19 countries that built this very large observatory in Argentina. So this is a 3,000 square kilometer array of detectors, and that is a little bit larger than the size of Luxembourg, the country of Luxembourg. And in this array, we can actually observe particles coming down, showering down, And we can see them in two different ways. We can see them, see this is the image of what a particle would be doing in a shower. We can see them when it hits the ground, the multiplication of all those original, the one original particle becomes hundreds of billions. But also we can see with the telescopes of ultraviolet light, we can see ultraviolet light moving at the speed of light in the atmosphere. So this is what I'm trying to do now, is to bring these kinds of telescopes that we put on the ground in Argentina to space. I have two projects that I'm leading, which are about to be one of them that we actually flew, which is this telescope. This beautiful telescope was flown from New Zealand this past year. It's called the Extreme Universe Space Observatory on a super pressure balloon. This is the team that was in New Zealand the day with the t-shirt, but we have many more scientists involved all over the world. Here's the actual launch, and when the balloon is launched, it becomes very, very large when it's up in the stratosphere, and that is above the stratosphere, and it's about a solar field worth, sorry, what did I say? It's like a football field size mega balloon. So it's very, very big, and it can carry our telescopes for many, many days. So we're building now a second balloon payload that will not only look for the fluorescence, that this ultraviolet light that's emitted by the particles coming down on us. It also will be looking for particles that come from the ground, from neutrinos. Remember the neutrinos I mentioned before, that arrive on the other side of the Earth. They cross the Earth and they show up from the ground upwards. So it's the inverse of the coming down shower. So we're going to use two types of techniques to be able to see those two events. And then finally, we're designing the Poema mission to go to space. This would be the probe of extreme multi-messenger astrophysics. And the goal of the multi-messenger studies here is to understand the origin of ultra-high-energy cosmic rays and also to observe neutrinos. And those together will give us the sense of where the most energetic accelerators in the universe are, how do they accelerate these particles, and how they interact in the source, on their way to Earth, and then at the atmosphere. Those are very important questions for astrophysics and also for fundamental physics. Poema, when it's built and launched, so hopefully in a decade or so, we will have different types of observing modes. It could see, for example, looking down the area equivalent to the UK, or we can tilt it to look for the neutrinos coming from the limb of the Earth, and that would cover an area roughly of the size of the US. So here's what the orbit of Poema would look like in the field of view of these upcoming particles, the neutrinos that I mentioned before. Now I want to share with you in my last minute or so some lessons learned by being a woman in the field. So we are still a pretty small minority. We are about, in our collaboration, about 10% are women. And when I joined MIT, we were 2 out of 60 in my class, so it was a bit awkward, to put it mildly. But, thinking long-term, thinking, why am I here? What do I want to do? And keep going, thinking really long-term versus the little issues that you might run into, really kept me going. So I hope that helps you keep going too. Don't apologize. My tendency, and I think many women have that same tendencies of apologizing too much. Just keep going and no apologies. Beware of the imposter syndrome. Don't think of you as an imposter if you're doing something that happens to have very few women. It's a very common feeling because it's not comfortable, let's put it that way. You don't look like everybody else. However, you're there for a good reason, because you like what you're doing and it's really an exciting field, and I really highly recommend. Having a life outside the field also helps keep some sanity checks and make sure that you enjoy life at its fullest. Also, explaining the work you're doing to non-experts is a very useful way to rethink the program and have some new ideas. And finally, really meeting mostly men, but a few women across the whole planet that love what they're doing, that are related to what you're doing. So people that share the same passion for understanding nature, understanding where the universe began, understanding how particles interact, why are we here, how did we get here, and all these wonderful questions that we try to answer a piece at a time. It's really wonderful. So, it's been a wonderful, wonderful journey to meet all these wonderful colleagues of mine. And, the less wonderful ones, I can probably forget most of them. So I keep, looking forward to the next step and having a great time in the meantime. So thank you so much for sharing these minutes with me. And I'm looking forward to some of your questions and, who knows, maybe really good answers too. Thank you so much.
Hi, everybody. I'm Francesca Rossi. I work at IBM, the research division of IBM in the US, but I'm also a professor of computer science at the University of Padova in Italy. And today I will talk about AI, artificial intelligence, and in particular, the role that women and multidisciplinarity plays, and the fact that AI has a lot of power and potential, but also with this, it comes also a great responsibility on how we use it and develop it. So what is AI? In my view, AI is a way to augment our own intelligence rather than, as the name may suggest, to create a new form of intelligence. Machines and people can really help each other, and AI is one technology, very powerful technology, that can really extend and augment our own intelligence, our own good way of doing things. AI as a discipline, as a scientific discipline, includes many different areas. Here I just list some few of them. It includes learning. A machine should be able to learn and adapt over time to be able to perform new tasks. It should be able to reason, do inference, understand causality, and reasoning about the knowledge that comes out of the environment around that machine, and perceive the environment. Otherwise, it will not be aware of where it is, and it will also has to be able to interact with us, because of course if we want these machines to be useful to us, we need them to be able to communicate and interact and collaborate with us. And the reason why AI right now is so much everywhere in the media, on the papers, on the in policymakers discussions and so on, is because right now really we had a lot of successes in applying AI. And these successes came not because AI researchers suddenly they started to invent things that before were not invented, but because the AI research was growing steadily for more than 50 years, since 1956, where the term artificial intelligence was first used. But the reason is that in recent years, we really had the convergence of these three things. One is, good and, innovative and improving algorithms to really perform the tasks that we want these machines to perform. The second one is the availability of huge amounts of data that these algorithms can use to understand what is around the machines and to make sense of this data. And the third one is enough computing power to really deal with all this data, because the data the handling of the data requires really a very huge computing power that now is available. So the coincidence of these three things really made a lot of recent successes possible. And AI is something that people think often about the future, something that is not there, kind of science fiction, but actually artificial intelligence is already in our lives, in many things that we do every day. Whenever we search something on the web, that's an algorithm based on AI that allows you to do that in a very good way. Whenever you use a translation service from one language to another one, that's a typical AI technique that is used. The digital assistants like Siri, Cortana, and others, in which you can ask questions and get reasonable responses, and especially they can understand when you speak. Image understanding, face recognition, text understanding and generation. So really many things that we don't realize anymore that is AI, because it's almost a solved problem, but it's really an AI technique that is fueling all these tasks that we do every day. So because of this and because of the potential that we have for the future, AI is really having and will have more and more a huge impact on all sectors of our lives, from our, as I said, everyday life, but also on various sectors like healthcare, transportation, manufacturing, education, and many, many others. So I cannot think of one area of our life which is not going to be heavily impacted and I think in a positive way, by artificial intelligence. So again, let me say a little bit more why I see AI as augmenting our own intelligence. The reason is that because I think that really machines and humans are very complementary. We are very good at doing certain things that machines are not very good at, and vice versa. So we are very good at asking interesting questions, but we are less good at answering those questions. So then that's where the machine can help us. We are very good at common sense reasoning, and the machines are still, at least for now, definitely not good at doing that. So they can help us instead with pattern discovery, statistical reasoning, and so on. So this complementarity is what needs to be really exploited in order to get the best results. So in the future, I don't see machines doing things on their own or humans doing things on their own, but I see teams of humans and machines doing things together. Of course, when you want to do things together, you exploit this complementarity, as I said, but it's not that you are making your life simpler, because you need the team, this human plus machine team, to really work well together. So, for example, you need machines to be able to communicate with humans in our own terms, with our own symbols, with our own languages, to have a meaningful dialogue with us. You need machines to understand what we really want, the goal that we are going to give to the machine without any misunderstanding, to avoid, undesired consequences. You need machines really to be able to be a team member, just like another human being would be, but with the additional capabilities that the machine and the AI can provide. So there are some challenges, however, because with this technology, which is so powerful and has such great potential of transforming every aspect of our life, it comes also a lot of responsibility on how we are going to develop, how we're going to deploy this technology, and how we're going to use it. So definitely AI will have a lot of the use of AI, the pervasive use of AI in our society will have a lot of societal implications, modifying the way we interact with each other, modifying the way we learn new things, we are educated on things, modifying the way we work and we on our jobs. So definitely all these aspects are to be considered in order to make AI as beneficial as possible for the largest amount of people as possible. Also, we need to be able to trust machines. Humans, to be in an effective team with a machine, they need to be able to trust both the machines, what they do, what the decision they make, the decision that they suggest humans to make, and so on, and also the companies or whoever is going to develop these AI tools. So the trust has to be in both directions, both on those that are going to develop the AI and also in the AI system itself, that it is going to behave ethically and is going to be aligned with our own principles. So let me give you an idea of some of the main ethical issues that people have been talking about in recent years. So in terms of AI development, there are three main very current issues that people consider and try to address technically or also not technically. One is the issue of bias. So bias is a form of prejudice that we may have on a certain topic, and that can lead to possibly unfair behavior and unfair treatment to certain groups rather than other ones. So we know that humans are very biased. I think that somebody put together a list of more than 20 or 30 kinds of bias that we have when we make decisions. But the problem is that we can, even in an unintended way, inject our own bias into AI techniques and in machines. And this, of course, should be avoided. And the reason why we can inject is because a lot of AI techniques are based on huge amounts of data that are provided by humans. So if humans are not careful in the diversity, in the inclusiveness of this data, then this data can contain contain a form of bias, and machines which are trained on those data can behave in a biased and unfair way. So there are many people that are working on trying to both detect and eliminate or mitigate bias in data or in AI systems, both for helping developers of the AI system and also for helping end users to trust and understand the bias and possibly the unbiased behavior of the machine. But really, this is something that I think it's something that, it will be in a very short term, probably will be tackled in a very optimal way, but it's still a subject of research. The second one is value alignment. So when we work with a machine, we would like to be sure that this machine follows the same values and principles that we do in our own everyday life on the tasks that we are helped by the machine. Think, for example, of a doctor. A doctor in his everyday job follows some ethical standards and guidelines, even given by laws and regulations. And if we want to support the decision-making capabilities of this doctor with an AI system, then we have to make sure that this AI system is going to follow and be aware and follow the same guidelines, the same principles and the same ethical considerations. So on top of these two topics, there is another one which is kind of orthogonal, which has to do with explanations and algorithm accountability. So if we want to build this system of trust between humans and machines, we want humans to ask the why question. So why are you suggesting me to do certain things and not others? So we want humans to be able to receive meaningful explanations from machines into their reasoning, into their decisions that are making or suggesting the humans to make. And so this is a kind of orthogonal, because this will help if humans understand whether the machine is biased or not, and also to understand whether there is value alignment or not. The next ethical issue, of course, that is very pressing in the mind of many people is the impact of AI on jobs. If machines are, how are machines going to impact the various jobs? I believe that all the jobs are going to be transformed by the use of AI. This is already true in many extent now, and has been in the past with the use of technology in our various jobs. But with AI, really, we will be transforming, significantly the way we work. We will work together with a machine that will help us do that job. So we will be free from doing things that machines can do much better than us. Obviously, there is some issue in understanding what to do with some jobs that will be impacted greatly by the use of machines, and in this respect, it's the responsibility of corporations to help people take part in this AI transformation by, for example, providing some reskilling environment where people really can move, their role within a job, so that they can usefully work together with machines and adapt their role within a job by allowing these machines to help. And the third one here I want to mention is that, of course, people are worried about the malicious uses of AI. So the fact that AI systems, AI technology is very, has usually a lot of dual or even more than dual uses. It can be used in a good and very beneficial way. It can also be used in other ways that are less beneficial. It can be hacked like any other technology. So a lot of care has to be put into that, and is being put into that. But definitely this is an issue that people think about. So as I said, we not only need to trust AI systems to behave in an ethical way, but also we need to trust corporations that are going to behave ethically when producing AI systems. So for example, at IBM where I work, we have this, first of all, it has to be clear the purpose of the building of AI systems. And for us, as I said at the beginning, the purpose is to augment human intelligence. rather than replacing it. The second important thing is how a corporation is going to deal with the data that, as I told you, a lot of AI techniques are heavily based on data. So how is that data going to be protected, the data of the clients, of the customers? Who is owning the data? Who is storing the data? Is the data going to be reused for others? Is the data protected enough? And for example, at IBM, we believe that the data belongs to the clients, and we are not reusing this data for other clients or other projects done in other sectors. But of course, this is a bit in conflict with the idea that the more data you have and the better you could do. But that's protection of data is also very important. The other thing is transparency. We need corporations to be very transparent of what they do with the data, as I said before, what algorithms they are using, and what are the best practices that they're using to use AI for a certain task, for helping certain professionals or giving some service to some customer. Again, as I mentioned before, corporations are also responsible for helping people be part of this AI revolution, to educate people, developers, users, in reskilling people and trying to make them really be in the best position to use AI for whatever they're doing in their life. And then I think that corporations have also to decide what it means for them to build AI in an ethical way and to build ethical AI, even beyond what is required by current laws and regulations. Of course, whoever deploys AI should comply to the laws and regulations, and they do. But I think that there is a role also for being leaders in AI, in really making the whole community and the whole society understand what it means to develop and use and deploy AI in an ethical way. And the graphic that I put here is because I think really that in building ethical AI is not in contrast with profit or with of a corporation, which of course is a very important issue for whoever develops and has people that and jobs to maintain. But I really think that building ethical AI and making beneficial impact on the world is really in sync with being profitable as well, and with business values. So what's been my path in AI, and why I think that women really are playing a big part here in this environment in building beneficial AI that I try to describe. So I worked in AI many years. So my first conference in AI that I attended was 30 years ago. At that time, there were only AI researchers, mostly men. And the only question, spelled out in many different ways, but the only question was, how can I make AI smarter, more efficient, more close to optimum, better performance, more accurate, and so on. So there was no talking at all about the impact of this technology on our society. Maybe because it was not pervasively used yet, but again, that was not in the picture of these people. Now, AI conferences have greatly changed in the composition. First of all, there are many more women, although of course they are not, gender parity yet, but they're much more multidisciplinary. I regularly talk and work and organize events with philosophers, psychologists, economists, sociologists, lawyers, policymakers, even science fiction writers. So really, more and more experts of various disciplines came to the AI arena to understand the impact, and the AI people got more and more interested in listening to them and in responding to questions like, what's your vision? What is requiring to make AI really beneficial, trustworthy, socially responsible, besides being smarter and smarter? And so so now the environment in research is really very, very multidisciplinary, multicultural as well, multi-stakeholder, so not just those that produce AI, but also those that are impacted by AI, with involvement from many communities like the UN, UNICEF, World Economic Forum, and so on. So here the picture that I put on this slide is a picture of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals that the UN has defined, and that represent what the UN thinks should be the direction for a beneficial improvement in our culture and our societies. And the AI people are really interested in understanding how to use this technology to address these sustainable development goals. In this slide, I'm not going to describe all of this, but this is just a list, a very incomplete list of many different initiatives that have been put in place to really understand how to make AI beneficial and to address and define and mitigate the possible concerns and issues that are in the development and deployment of AI. So the last thing that I want to finish with is that really this multidisciplinary and multi-gender and multicultural approach is the only one that can bring us to really build beneficial AI. But at the same time, while we do that, we really are thinking more about ourselves, about our own values, about our own biases. So I really think that this path in making AI more socially responsible will also improve ourselves and our social responsibility, which is, I think, the ultimate goal, so to improve what we are and to understand better what we are as humans. Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. Happy International Women's Day. My name is Ting Shi. I am the founder and CEO of ClickMedics. And today I'm taking you on my journey on how I built a technology company designed to serve over 1 billion people. And this started about 10 years ago when I was a graduate student at MIT, getting my MBA and my master's in systems engineering. I was in a class called Development Ventures, and the only assignment in our class was simply stated as create a business that will impact over 1 billion people. So that's what we started thinking about. And healthcare is so important and it affects everyone, and it's one of the most important things that is so under-addressed for billions of people out there. So we started to tackle healthcare. In order to do that, well, first, how can I, sitting in the United States, know what the other billions are doing and going through in terms of healthcare? So we went to sub-Saharan Africa to see how are the poorest of the people getting access in healthcare. And this I call the discovery process. And as you'll see, some people, they literally live in mud huts. Lots of family members live in one of the huts. And for them to just get the daily supplies, they may need to walk sometimes 4 or 6 hours to get water. To go to a doctor, it might take them a whole day. When they get to the doctor's office, they might have to wait a long time. And even in urban slums where there are a lot of clinics, some are costly, some are free. And when you get to the clinics, you certainly are waiting, sometimes for days, until you're actually seen. And even once you got to the clinic or a hospital and there's a bed for you, the condition isn't the best. And when we looked at what are some root causes of this problem, well, it turns out there's simply not enough medical experts or medical doctors. And this is a picture of all the doctors in dermatology in Uganda, and you can count them on 2 hands. And this is certainly an issue that we think we can address with technology. And when you look around worldwide, you see that there is a shortage of doctors everywhere. And even parts of the U.S., if you look at rural America, or if you look at where are the best doctors in the United States, they're likely in New York, California, not in Minnesota. And so we thought, how can we come up with a solution? We came up with some hypotheses. One is to look at well, can we get to 1 billion patients, tell them about technology, tell them about doctors that are available and get them the care? Or can we do it the other way around? We empower each health organization to serve more patients so that if they're serving, say, 1,000 patients now, can they serve 10,000 patients with technology? And that's what we thought. It's actually a viable way of getting to 1 billion people. And the way we thought technology can be used is simply using a mobile phone. And recall this was 10 years ago when that was actually a novel concept. And with the prevalence of smartphones and the cost of smartphones going down, it is a scalable solution. So we thought using mobile smartphones, we can create little apps on them and start collecting symptoms information that mimics the questions a doctor would ask of the patient. For example, how are you feeling? Do you have a fever? Or do you feel pain anywhere? And on top of that, with the emerging technologies for diagnostics tools, we can take blood pressure, we can take glucose, we can take all these metrics about the body that the doctor needs to make the diagnosis. So we use the technology for information collection. We make it so that it's really easy to use and that a health worker or a rural doctor can just follow the prompts that shows up on a mobile phone or a tablet. And the information is transmitted to physicians who can then come back with instructions for treatment as well as diagnosis. So to see if this works, we started a pilot. And here are some examples. This is actually an HIV patient with skin lesions that is uncontrollable and just keeps on growing more and more. And by collecting the information about the symptoms of the patient, the information can then be collected. And you'll see with the information collected, doctors from around the world, particularly specialists, and this one a dermatologist, can then prescribe and actually instruct. And you'll see the treatment was actually quite easy. It's a topical, it's an ointment she applied every 8 hours for 7 days. And you see the dramatic improvement in the condition. And this is one of the miraculous things we witnessed in the pilot, that this was simple, it really worked, and it's scalable. So we continue to systematize this process so that we can do more, and also seeing what are the actual benefits we're getting. So we're seeing that for doctors, instead of seeing a patient which takes at least 20 minutes, they can make a decision on what the problem is and what the treatment is in less than 5 minutes, given the information. And for patients who otherwise would wait months to get treatment, they can actually get a treatment in less than 3 days because the doctors are more available to tell them what the treatments would be. And we piloted in Botswana, where there was literally one oral surgeon for about 1.8 million people. And this is Bonnie. You see, she's one of the very, very first health workers I've worked with. And she used a mobile phone and entered a questionnaire, filled out the symptoms information, and transmitted to the doctor. And by doing a program like this in Botswana alone, we've saved over $1 million just on transportation costs. This is transportation for the doctors and the nurse team to go to different rural areas to care for the people, as well as reducing the transportation costs for the patients. If they did not need to travel for days to get to a doctor, they could just see a rural nurse in their community. And what we also saw is that for diseases like cervical cancer, health workers can be trained to screen for symptoms and get a diagnosis from the women's health expert much more easily. And some of the learnings we saw and some of the hypotheses we were trying to prove is, can we actually use a mobile app? Can a rural health worker who's barely literate read off on the app and then collect the information that mimicked what a medical specialist would have asked? And it turned out it was easier than we thought. Most training took less than an hour, and we were able to get the faster treatment to the patient. And now we're also able to see how much demand there is from entire populations. For example, outbreak of diseases, we can detect that. For example, uprising of chronic diseases such as diabetes in certain population, we can now see what the demand is in the population and then look for ways to care for larger populations, negotiate discounts, find more physicians who can help, and really try to optimize and scale the solution we have. And, you know, as Francesca talked about AI, a lot of what we do is actually trying to create an algorithm for how a medical specialist, a human who has years of experience, will make a diagnosis. And then we programmed it into an application, and now we're allowing it to start learning, to start collecting this massive database that we have of about 500,000 patients, and start learning what are the patterns, what are the treatment potentials, what are the algorithms, and start training the system so that it becomes smarter and smarter, so that it can be more automated in telling the health workers what a potential diagnosis and treatment may be. And to scale, we pilot it in more places, and as we pilot, we work with governments, health organizations, hospitals to find out how the system can be paid for, how can we reduce costs in the healthcare system. And also what we've seen is that for hospitals that are trying to reach more patients, we increase about 70% of their patient pool for patients that they otherwise can't reach because they were not advertising or sending doctors out to rural areas. We also saw that there's higher percentage of patients being treated, as well as the current health staff. If they only had one nurse, well, now they can serve 2 or 10 times more people. And overall, we saw a reduction in cost, particularly in diabetes, through our partnership with Western Diabetes Institute, and that's actually happened in California. And we've trained more health workers with technology-enabled jobs as mobile health screeners and health workers, and over 2,000 jobs of this sort were created and people trained to be mobile health workers. And we work with a number of customers, from hospitals to government to corporations and nonprofits. And the model that we've seen working is if you can empower the frontline workers, connect them to doctors anywhere else, and then you can create new services that will generate new revenue streams for the hospitals, for the health workers, as well as for the technology businesses. And if we can integrate with more diagnostics tools, what you're seeing here is a number of Bluetooth devices that work with the mobile kiosk that essentially tells the health worker what to ask of the patient, and it acts like an artificially intelligent doctor. And this is one of our programs in India where a nurse is asking patient questions and trying to help with her health issues. And all of this information aggregated allows us to see trends, to see population health data, and empowering health workers. And this is one example of our program with Medtronic, where we've seen about 400,000 patients so far that have ear infection. And a lot of these patients either didn't know this is a treatable condition and they just suffer through and actually lose their hearing altogether. And when we look at machine learning opportunities, all the images we're collecting, we can actually start to teach the machine to automatically diagnose ear infections. And in other places, this is in Mexico, where we are screening at schools, we're screening both the children and their parents. We found that 57% of the students and parents had at least one chronic disease like diabetes, hypertension, heart disease that they didn't know they had. Similarly, in India, when we screened 5,000 people in the communities, we found that a third of them have diabetes, compared to more world national average, about 7 to 9%. It's 3 times higher than anywhere else in the world. And we're shifting more of these type of healthcare services even into workplaces where people spend most of their time. And coming in the very near future, we're looking at providing Uber-like approach whereby consumers can download our app, can then find intelligently suggested services for healthcare needs. And what can you do? If you have an idea, you want to design, build, pilot it first and see if it works. And I think most importantly, find out how will you get paid? How will your customers get paid or increase their service offering? And also, it's very important to look at the impact. Are you actually improving health outcomes? Are you also improving health livelihoods? And in order to serve billions, you have to have a pathway to also make billions. As much as social impact is important, most of the very successful ones are funded. So one of the very important things, and I think as female entrepreneurs, is find funding. And statistically, women don't get as much funding. And I think it's important that we realize that, learn the tricks, learn how to go to acceleration schools, and get the funding you need to scale your impactful ideas. Thank you. And we'll now start with some questions and answers. Francesca and I will be answering some of the questions. And I think one of the first questions I see, it's actually for Francesca, is how can AI be applied to any industry or system, particularly some of the questions asked about oil and gas and construction?
Yeah. So yes, so that's a question that I can start answering maybe while the people write questions also for you, Ting. So actually, AI, I think that even in a way that we cannot see, is already applied to most systems, to most industry sectors. I can give you an idea of things that we do normally every day, and we don't consider it to be AI, but actually it is. Like every time we use our GPS to decide the best way to go from one place to another one. There is an algorithm that is typical AI algorithm that is on the first chapter of every AI textbook that is able to find among the huge number of paths from one place to another one, the one that has the shortest, or the one that has the features that we want. Or in many other things, every time you take a picture, you see that around the face of the person that you take, that is in the picture, you see this green box, and that's because there is a face recognition algorithm that is also a typical AI algorithm. So AI is this thing that usually AI is a label that is given to things that we don't know how to do well yet, but once we know how to do them well, then it becomes just another program and not really AI. And then, yes, in terms of oil and gas, I'm sure that oil and gas and construction, there is a lot of potential. Oil and gas, I know for sure that there are AI tools that have been used there in the decision-making process and in the handling of large amounts of data, because more and more professionals are surrounded by data. And if they don't find ways, for example, through the AI technologies, to make sense of that data, then they will make decisions which are less, optimal, less good, because less grounded, less informed. And so definitely, that will is already being done, and we have seen also by Ting in the healthcare domain, that is one very big application domain, and even in the short term for diagnosis, for deciding the best therapy and so on, for AI. So you may know that IBM also has a very big effort in trying to apply AI techniques to the healthcare domain in order to help doctors find the best diagnosis for a certain disease and find the best therapy. And as Ting showed, we can improve the decision-making capabilities of doctors in our own first world countries. But the main impact, the more significant and beneficial impact, of course, will be in developing countries where doctors don't have the same experience, maybe they don't have the same number of cases that they can see. And so there is really where, the potential is really great.
Thank you, Francesca. Another question related to the mobile technology platform is whether it can be extended to pharmaceutical companies. And I think that's one of the very key areas in a lot of work around how to help patients adhere to medications, how to see earlier on if the medication is having any adverse reaction or treatment. And we're very much working in the patient engagement and patient drug adherence portion of it. And a lot of what we do, what we've seen is that health workers, or in the U.S. would be your family caregiver or someone who looks after you, are very, very important and effective reinforcers of taking the medication correctly. And simple things, that can be used is it's a small questionnaire that assesses whether the medication is having bad reaction. It could be, are you feeling pain? Are you feeling better? Or are you feeling worse? Or things like, are your legs swollen? That could be a sign of edema. And for a heart disease patient, that means the medication needs to be adjusted. So as we're building upon these applications and working with pharmaceutical industries, we are also obviously using the intelligence the machines can provide to try to automate and earlier and detect earlier some of these issues. And thank you all for all the questions you have. We will be able to answer all of them offline as well. And we saw all of your chats, and thank you from everyone from everywhere who's joined. Thank you so much for joining the very first series of Global Marathons. And stay tuned and join the next one next Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank
Happy
you.
International
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Day.